Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Barry Hawkins Live. Unsurprisingly, I am Barry Hawkins. We continue our series on effective team-level development process, talking tonight about the Daily Stand-Up. The Daily Stand-Up is an integral part of batch development processes like Scrum, also like XP, and it's the shortest meeting. It's the most frequent. You would think it's the simplest, but surprisingly, it's one of the most tricky to get right, and it's crucial to the success of your batch development cycles. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Daily stand-ups, how to have more effective ones, key things to look out for. Now, unsurprisingly, perhaps surprisingly, maybe some of you are thinking, good Lord, he's doing an entire stream just on daily stand-ups. Barry Hawkins, how are you going to fill up an entire stream talking about daily stand-ups? Sweetheart, I could talk way more than a single stream about daily stand-ups. There's a lot to it, but time is limited, as are your attention spans. So we're going to pick just key ones to cover in our time together. All right. So for one thing, for those who maybe are development process curious but not experienced, in batch development processes, once you have your cycle, which is a fixed length of time where you start by breaking down and committing to a body of work, you then execute that work, come to the end of it, review, retrospect on that, and then let the information that you've gathered inform how you approach that next cycle. Well, in between those things, every day there's a thing called the Daily Stand-Up, and it's called the Daily Stand-Up because it's meant to be a standing meeting. Standing because when people are standing, they typically are more motivated to get to the point of what a meeting was about and get through it. Now, of course, in work from home and fully distributed scenarios, standing is more of a metaphor than anything, but it's meant to be this effective, focused, short meeting in most of the days of the development cycle. More on that in a bit. So when it comes to how to have effective daily stand-ups, what are some key things to bear in mind? One, I'll say first and foremost, when you have your daily stand-up during the day is crucial. I recommend that you have your daily stand-up near the start of core hours. What do I mean by core hours? Core hours are the agreed upon hours when everyone needs to either be in the office or available online for a synchronous meeting, synchronous communication. We're all together at the same time. Person speaks, other people hear, respond, that sort of thing. Core hours, that's what I mean by core hours. And the reason for having this at the start of core hours is the daily stand-up is meant to set the plan for the day. That is, it's taking a look at the batch of work that we've committed to complete in this cycle and saying, where are we at today on completing this batch of work? How are we doing at completing this batch of work? Now, when your daily stand-up is scheduled in the latter half of the day, so many people even do it at the end of the day. The thing about having the daily stand-up later in the day is some of the learnings and touch points you could have had in the daily stand-up that you could have acted upon are often forfeit, because people are usually, there's something about our human rhythms where we are more inclined to act on things that we hear about during a daily cycle. When a team that is co-located or working together and in close enough time zones to be communicating synchronously. If you wait to sync with one another until the end of the day, very often people will speak in the past tense. Well, I did this. Well, by the way, I ran into this problem, or I was going to get that to you today, but it turns out I couldn't. I haven't told you all day, but I'm telling you now because this is the Daily Stand-Up. So avoid placing your stand-up at the middle or end of your core hours. Have it at the beginning, because you're typically going to have a better result and more of the intended interaction with your team members. Next, focus on the batch of work. That is, this should be a daily stand-up where we're coming together to develop our plan of attack for the day. It's not a status meeting. And I most often see, the trouble I most often see with daily stand-ups is that they have devolved into a status meeting. And what is more soul draining and counterproductive than a status meeting? Because in status meetings, there's a dynamic where it's almost an arms race of pros, where let's say the first person gives their update, and that's that one challenging person who their daily stand-up update, which is really more of a status, is worked on JavaScript, very funny. Stating the language that you did your work in that's not even a status, let alone helping us form our plan for the day on how we're going to keep the tasks and stories moving from to do to in progress to in review to done. But let's say the next person, they give a more convincing update. They are secretly going to Toastmasters on nights and weekends, and they level up and give this really compelling update that sounds like, whoa, you have been busy, productive, and very interactive with your teammates. Well, now the stakes are higher. JavaScript guy, that was such a low bar, right? There was no pressure, but now this person has sounded like they've really contributed. Well, now there's this feeling for the people who still have to give a status to say, well, okay, I need to come up with something convincing. And the next thing you know, there are people going on and laboring. It's like talking about what they did yesterday is writing copy for like LL Bean or a Williams Sonoma catalog. It's like, just what did you do, and what work is ready for someone else to take on, and what do you plan to work on today, and let's make sure we know what that is. So to focus people on the batch of work that we're committed to, as opposed to just having a status meeting, this underscores the importance of a good task board. And we'll have a session on task boards dedicated to what makes for a good task board. But I will say right now, briefly, a good task board visually conveys the batch of work we have completed to as the outcomes or user stories that are what people want to see from our team, the tasks that we have broken down in order to accomplish those outcomes, and the state of those current tasks, who's working with them, who has them ready to be handed off to the next person, or who's completed theirs and is ready to move on to something else. That's intended to be the intent and the focus of an effective daily stand-up. There's a long-standing problem with digital task boards. So, Jira Scrum boards or Kanban boards, similar challenges exist in Pivotal Tracker, Rally, and others, where there's the ability to filter on an individual team member, or basically to look at the work, to look at the subtasks or tasks in a very focused way, and go subtask by subtask or person by person, and just show their subtasks, the things that are assigned to them. That kind of subtask myopia is dangerous, because instead of looking at the batch of work, how all of the team members' work interrelates with one another, and how effective handoffs and minimal delays between handoffs are crucial to keeping the work moving, when you move to a focus on subtasks, that myopia, suddenly we go from seeing the batch to having individual updates about, this little piece and this little piece. and this little piece. And when that's the conversation that you're having, it's very hard, or it's at least way more challenging to relate the meaning and implication of where the current state of that subtask, the fact that that person's been on it for 3 days, not asking for help, still on it for 3 days. It was initially tasked as 2 hours. It's a crucial piece before quite a bit of work that has to come after it can happen, but we're just still hearing him say he's working on it. So work on, experiment with an improved, even if you're stuck with digital, and well, right now aren't all of us in the pandemic and work from home, but make your digital task board as batch oriented as opposed to subtask oriented as it can be. Now, next, about effective daily stand-ups. Keep it short. Brevity is crucial. This is meant to be a huddle. In fact, I have it on good authority from some of the people who were involved in the creation of Scrum that the reason it got that name that sounds super not cool, but it's a rugby reference, the daily stand-up where everyone comes together and looks at moving the work further along is the analogy there is the scrum in rugby where the players come together and try and move the ball. And I'm not rugby literate, so I stop right about here in terms of commentary. And that is the intent. It's meant to be very focused, very short. You'll hear most training you hear says, the daily stand-up should be 15 minutes. I'll tell you that I tend to aim toward 10 minutes for a right sized and appropriately sized team. And I say, like, even in video game settings where team sizes are not 5 to 8 and tend to be more like 8 to 12, I've still been able to have effective 10-minute daily stand-ups. Now how do you keep it that short? Well, there are a few key things to bear in mind. One is the updates. The dialogue is meant to be team member to team. Each person is meant to say what they accomplished yesterday, what they intend to do today, and what, if anything, is standing in their way, or what, if anything, do other people need to know about handoffs, things that they need people to run with. When you have people also throwing into the mix person to person or person to persons, like one person just talking to a couple of people or one person, that tends to bloat the stand-up, and you are taking time of engaging, involving the whole team at watching one or two people talk, 2 or 3 people have a conversation with one another that could totally be had afterward. So keep the updates and the dialogue to team member to the team, not person to person or person to persons. Those are meant to be the follow-ups that happen after the daily stand-up. I do see one thing that sometimes happens, and I see it very often in teams where the functional manager of these people is also their team steward or scrum master or what have you. And, so they all report directly to this person. So there's already a hierarchy and a power dynamic in play. But I've also seen it with program managers or dev managers who tend to view their craft as primarily controlling and driving people. But it's this, they're not satisfied with the updates they're getting, so they hold people there and they continue to inquisition the individual team members. It's like to riff on the old pun. The stand-up will continue until the team steward's morale improves. Like, they're going to sit there and continue asking people and grilling people because they're not getting the answers they want. Spoiler, I've never seen someone actually get the answers they want and actually have effective stand-ups by punishing the team in that way. I've had a few engineering managers who would regularly have 30 and 45 minute daily stand-ups attempting to affect that outcome. Never saw it succeed. So avoid that. Keep it short. 10 minutes should be the goal, team member to team. To actually continue on that, for the individuals in the group, when you are giving your update, in the daily stand-up, speak to the group, not the team steward or scrum master of your team. I can remember Mike Cohn telling me many years ago now, a trick when if you're having trouble, if you're a team steward or scrum master and you're having trouble with the team, they're talking to you, they're like giving status to you as opposed to speaking to the team. Don't make eye contact with them. A little bit harder on Zoom or Google Meet, but don't let them just speak directly to you. And like, even if it's a verbal direction to the team of like, okay, so did everybody get that? Did everybody get what she was saying? So are we clear on where that's at and what needs to happen next? Redirect them back to dialogue and interaction with one another. So speak to the group, because we're confirming or developing a plan for the day, not simply reporting in. The other thing that we're trying to do, I'm realizing that I actually did not have my light on. But the other thing we're trying to do is avoid missed handoffs, because when a daily stand-up isn't as effective, when it's just someone giving status, you can miss that something's ready for someone else to run with it. And in teams, if a team's having trouble with an effective daily stand-up, you can bet they're probably also not having very interactive conversations through the course of the day. So if something gets missed, if a handoff gets missed in a daily stand-up, there's a very good chance that something is going to sit idle and not picked up by the next person for another 24 hours. And given that most sprints are 10 business days, that's a 10% loss in potential time to service that task. Really more than 10%, but let's not get too technical here. Another thing about for individuals in participating in a daily stand-up, it needs to be okay and acceptable to ask for help in the daily stand-up. If someone has taken on the task, like there's this one task and we all said it would take 5 hours. We all knew it was going to be a nightmare. Everybody was wondering who was going to end up picking it up, and it kind of sat there for a little bit like an overripe avocado where you're wondering, is that actually worth putting on my toast? And eventually someone gets it, and you can see the dread, right? Like, I'll get it, and you come to the next daily stand-up and you're like, I know we put a 5 on it. I think I still have 4 hours left, even though I worked on it the whole day. Then they come into the stand-up the next day. I still think I have 4 hours. And they'll do 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours. And then there's like, it's the day before the end of the sprint. They're like, this is not going to work. And then the story ends up carrying over. Feel okay. Or if you're a team member seeing someone in this predicament, offer to help. But I coach individuals to say, hey, if I could get someone to look at, take like 30 minutes or an hour and look at this with me, I think I could probably work through it, but I'm just stuck myself right now. And actually, that is usually what happens. If you get someone looking at it with you, that pragmatic programmer practice of rubber ducking, or even just through the practice of pair programming, or just explaining something. There's something about an idea or a problem that's stuck in your head when you're making it travel through your motor speech path, and having to verbalize it. It shakes loose new understandings and new realizations that just simply don't come when you're just inside your own head. So ask for help. Lastly, make sure that your daily stand-ups are inviting and worthwhile to others. Because remember, the daily stand-up is not just meant to be ensuring that the team has a plan for the day. It's ensuring that people who are waiting on or who have dependent work from that team also know what's happening that day. When I've seen daily stand-ups really working well, I've regularly seen people from departments or teams outside of the team regularly attend because they don't want to miss. They want to know the minute something's ready from a given team. And that includes regular attendance from departments like marketing, legal, live operations, customer support, because they want to know up to the day, what's going on with the team, what's ready, because, some story, don't wait till the end of the sprint, because many stories complete and should be completing, some of them, before the end of the sprint, and that or the development cycle, and these people can then take that and run with it. So those are a few things. Like I say, there's a lot to effective daily stand-ups, but those are a few key things that I've seen be particularly effective. Now, looking at, all right, what questions do we have here? Ahead of questions, John Mayer, happy Thursday to you as well, good sir. Good to see you again, as always. All right, Q&A. What if team members won't talk at my daily stand-up? It is, software engineering and software product development is a field that does seem to tend to draw the introverted among us, like myself. And as a result, you often find challenges with people just not giving. You have people who don't give effective updates or who don't want to speak. Make it. What I usually try to do is one, make it safe and give them a script. For people who are challenged with just doing extemporaneous speaking around, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? This is where a physical task board or a really effective digital task board, and I've seen some interesting experiments with using diagramming tools like Miro to have the digital equivalent of a physical task board. I think there's a lot of promising potential with that technique, by the way. But just to use the example of a physical task board, I give team members a pattern of, think of the tasks on the task board as your speaker's notes. And if it helps you, go up and touch, so I got this done yesterday, touch the thing you did yesterday. And if you're still working and I'm still on that today, they can touch like that. Or I finished this and got this over to QA, and so they're reviewing it now, and I've picked this up. I picked this up today, but before I can start working on it, my Okta is jacked up again, and so I don't have authentication, and I need to get that fixed. Well, see, now they've used the tasks on the task boards to help them with their anxiety about having to just come up with words. They now have speaker's notes, as it were. So experiment with things like that, like techniques and tactics that help them feel more comfortable, less anxious about speaking in the daily stand-up. Let's see here. What's the point of having the daily stand-up on the first and last days of the sprint? Good question. As a matter of fact, for 15 years or more, I have not had the daily stand-up on the first and last days of the sprint. Because if you think about it, on the first day of the sprint, the day should ideally begin with cycle planning or sprint planning, because you're starting a new batch of work. There's really nothing to daily stand up about. And on the last day of a cycle, it's pencils down. I tend to prefer having the sprint review followed by the sprint retrospective in the first half of the day, butted up towards lunch, because you want to optimize for flow. I should speak to that. And then have the afternoon as that slack, that space to wrap up a sprint neatly. So on the last day of the sprint as well, there's really nothing to daily stand up about. It's in. The sprint review is actually the meaningful interaction that many of the people who attend your daily stand up would also attend. So for me, there's not much of a point in having the daily stand up on the first and last days of the sprint. Good question. How would I ever have a daily stand up less than 30 minutes? Well, so some of the points we made earlier should help. I think another aspect of that makes daily stand-ups go very long is when the work that's coming into a sprint is not very well vetted or groomed. That is, when backlog grooming and backlog maintenance, there'll be a separate session for each of those. When backlog and grooming and backlog maintenance are not happening, it does tend to make for a bumpy sprint or development cycle, because everyone's having to clarify and figure out what was this work in the first place anyway. And a primary outlet to have those things surface is the daily stand-up, because we're all having to come together, and especially in teams, if they're not doing grooming and they're not doing maintenance, and the work, the stories, etc., that are coming into their sprint are not well understood and discussed, they're probably not having good regular discussion on an ongoing basis anyway. So you have this, this lack of communication and interaction fosters a lack of clarity in the work, and a regular outlet when everyone's having to come together and they're being asked point blank, where are you on this? Well, that's usually a place where you're going to see them start to try to hash it all out. And that does tend to make daily stand-ups go long. So have a look at the quality of your backlog, the health and well-being of your backlog. Look at, backlog maintenance and grooming, and look at how sprint planning's going. Are they good discussions where you're exiting sprint planning with a body of work, a batch of work that the team seems to generally understand and feel good about? Or is it like, well, we'll figure it out as we jump in, that sort of thing? That's usually the harbinger of challenging daily stand-ups. And then what kind of teams have the most challenging daily stand-ups? Well, large teams, overly large teams have really challenging daily stand-ups. I've had some development teams that were 20, 24 people. That's bananas. That's 2 to 4 teams worth of people. And when you're trying to get through a daily stand-up with that many people, it's it's like a made-for-TV movie that's riffing on The Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe from Mother Goose. It's challenging. Another type of team that has challenging daily stand-ups, a team that it can be small. They can even all be from the same functional discipline, even the same engineering sub-discipline. They can all be like back-end platform engineers, and they can all be front-end, React developers. But there's a lot of interpersonal tension and conflict. That makes for a really challenging daily stand-up, because there's a little openness. There's certainly a reluctance to display any vulnerability if they're having challenges with a task or a thing they're trying to tackle. So that's a challenge. And then I think also teams, so I'll say lastly, teams that have a high number of cross-functional skills on them, they also tend to have challenges, because even if it's as right-sized as it can be, because teams with a high number of cross-functional skills tend to skew larger. So even when right-sized, they're still larger. They can have a good interpersonal dynamic, but because you have to have that many different skills together to holistically work on a part of your product, and this is often true with video games, it's just a lot to get through, but it can be done. I will say that when a team, even a video game development team, gets above 12 people, that I do tend to see it hockey stick. The communication overhead. So just bear that in mind. Well, those are the questions that we have for today on Daily Standups. This has been Effective Daily Standups with me, Barry Hawkins, on Barry Hawkins Live. If you are new, or if you're viewing this later on demand, please do like and subscribe so that you can get notifications about upcoming streams, as well as notifications on when those streams, if you couldn't make it, when they're available for on-demand viewing, because it helps grow and build the channel and makes it easier for me to share and get the word out. So please also share with your friends if you found some value here, and we will see you next week. Thanks a ton.